A Gestapo cell, damp concrete walls, a bare bulb. The man on the floor has been beaten until his own face feels borrowed. A voice reads the verdict, flat, almost bored. He will be shot as a spy. Here is what is wrong with that sentence. He is no spy. He is a fighter pilot, shot out of the sky over occupied France. And he is a Texan, an American who walked into someone else's war and threw away his own citizenship for the right to fight in it. So they make him an offer that is not an offer. Give us the names. The French men and women who hid you, fed you, risked everything for you. Hand them over, or you die against that wall tonight. And the broken man gives them a name, his old French teacher, a woman who is, at this exact moment, an ocean away, safe in the United States, far beyond their reach. A death sentence hangs over his head, and he is still playing them. The officers deciding whether he lives have no idea who they are holding. They do not know they have caught the prisoner, who will become so impossible to keep that men will one day call him a king, the real face behind the most famous escape Hollywood ever filmed. How does a condemned man walk out of this room alive? And what happens when a prisoner decides no wall is real? To understand the cell, you have to go back to a freight train. Texas, the depths of the Great Depression. A young man named Bill Ash rides the rails with the rest of the country's discarded hopping boxcars, sleeping in hobo camps, learning the only lesson poverty ever teaches well, which is how to survive on nothing and how to hate a bully. And across the ocean, in the early days of the war, the biggest bully the world has ever produced is on the move. His own country has not entered the fight, so he stops waiting for it. He crosses into Canada and joins the Royal Canadian Air Force. There is a catch, and it is not a small one. To do it, he has to renounce his American citizenship. The law of the time forces the choice, and he makes it without flinching. He gives up his country to go to war for a war his country is sitting out. Remember this, because it is the whole man in a single act. The camps that are coming did not build his defiance. He arrived already built. He was the kind of person who would throw away the safest thing he had, rather than stand on the sidelines while something evil won. They train him. They give him a Spitfire. By 1942, he was flying offensive sweeps over occupied France, the dangerous work of crossing the channel into enemy air to pick fights nobody is forcing you to pick. On the 24th of March, his squadron escorted bombers against the power station at Comines. And over France, the fighters of the German JG-26, some of the most lethal pilots in the world, fell on them out of the sun. Ash's Spitfire is hit. The engine coughs, then dies under his hands, the propeller windmilling useless, the ground rising. He has seconds. He rides the dead fighter down into a crash landing near Calais, in open country crawling with German troops. And the impossible part is that he climbs out of the wreck alive at all. And the second war, the one this story is really about, begins on the ground. The French resistance reaches him before the Germans do. Ordinary civilians, shopkeepers and farmers and housewives pass him hand to hand through Lille and on toward Paris, hiding a foreign airman in their homes knowing that the penalty for it is death, their own death. They feed him at their tables with German patrols in the street outside. They move him at night, papers forged, hearts in their throats. He sees up close what real courage costs and who pays it, and he never forgets the arithmetic of it, that every day he stays free, someone else is gambling their family's life on him. Then, someone talks. An informer gives him up, and the Gestapo closes the trap that the cell was waiting at the end of, which brings us back to the beating, the death sentence, the name of the French teacher safe in America. He should die there. The Third Reich had a single fate reserved for spies. And then the script breaks. The Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, steps in and claims him.
Stop!
A Luftwaffe officer says.
He's not a spy.
Then what is he?
A downed enemy airman. Airmen are our responsibility. He goes to a prison camp, not a firing squad.
Reluctantly, they pull him off the firing line. It saves his life. But look closely at what it actually does. It files him, neatly, into the one system this entire story is about. The prison network the Reich built to hold captured Allied flyers. The Germans believe they have just solved the problem of Bill Ash. They have him behind wire now, counted twice a day, watched from towers. They process him into Stalag Luft 3, the camp built specifically to be escape-proof. And here is the thing they cannot see. He feels no relief walking through the gate. While the guards stamp his papers, his eyes are already on the fence, the spacing of the posts, the rhythm of the head count, the angle of the searchlights. He looks at a locked door the way other men look at a question. They think they have caught a pilot. But have they really secured their prisoner? Or have they just brought the most dangerous escaper in Europe inside their own fences? September 1942. The first attempt comes fast because waiting is not in him. He is at a camp near Subin, and he finds the gap the way he will find it again and again, not by smashing a wall, but by becoming someone else on paper. He swaps identities with a British Army private because Army prisoners are sent out on work parties beyond the wire, and Air Force officers are not. He marches out through the gate as another man, and at the first opening he runs. He is recaptured the same night. Write that down because it is the pattern, and the pattern is the point. Out fast and get caught fast. By any normal scoreboard, a failure. But here is the strange thing about Bill Ash, the thing the Germans will take years to understand. The failure does not register. He is not crushed walking back through the gate. He is already, on that same walk, working on the next one. To him, a recapture is not the end of an escape. It is the gap between escapes. The next one is not a man slipping out a gate. The next one is the stuff of legend. The plan is a tunnel, dug from beneath the camp latrines. Picture the dimensions because they are insane. A shaft barely 2 feet wide. A passage running something like 150 feet under the compound. And the route in, the part no film would dare invent, runs down through the latrine sump, which means the diggers lower themselves into a pit of raw human sewage and wade through it, in the dark, to reach the tunnel mouth. They dig it anyway. Night after night, men strip to the skin, lower themselves into the filth, and scrape at the earth with bare hands and bent tins, hauling the spoil back out in bags, breathing air that has almost no air left in it. A cave in here does not mean a delay. It means a man buried alive in sewage under his own prison. They keep digging. And on one night, 33 men go out through it. 33. One of the largest and without question the foulest mass breakouts of the entire war, and at his side in it is one of the great names of the prison camps, the legendary Wingsday. For a few hours, the escape-proof system is quietly hemorrhaging prisoners out through its own toilets, and the guards in the towers see nothing at all. Ash and a companion strike out for Warsaw, moving by night across occupied Poland, living on nerves. 4 days later, they were caught. If true survival stories that sound impossible are the reason you are here, this channel hunts them down, and the button below is how you make sure the next one finds you. 4 days of freedom, paid for with weeks of digging through filth, and then back behind the wire. But something has changed, and it is not in his favor. The Germans have noticed him now. He is no longer a face in a head count. In their files, he becomes a category, a marked man, what they call a persistent escapist, a prisoner who will not stop and must be watched harder than all the rest. The label feels like a punishment. It is actually a promotion. They have just told him, in their own paperwork, that he matters, that he frightens them, that he is winning. Their solution is logical, and, as it turns out, catastrophic. If a few men keep causing all the trouble, gather the worst of them together in tougher camps under heavier guard, where they can be controlled. Ash looks at that plan and sees what they have missed entirely. Every time they move a mass of prisoners, they create chaos, new camps, confused guards, paperwork that does not yet know who anyone is. To a man whose signature trick is becoming someone else on a list, a mass transfer is not a tightening of the net. It is a door swinging open, and he is about to start walking through the enemy's own filing system. But how far can a man travel using nothing more than confusion and a borrowed identity? And what happens when the Germans realize their prison system is helping him escape? When the order comes to move men from Sagan East to Stalag Luft 6 at Heidekrug, far up on the Lithuanian frontier, Ash makes sure he is on the train. Not because he is told to be, because he chooses to be. He changes identity again and rides along to the new camp, chasing exactly the disorder he predicted, the messiness of a place that does not yet know its own prisoners. His method has matured. He is no longer just escaping from conditions. He is engineering the conditions he escapes from. And at Heidekrug, he stops being only an escaper and becomes something the Germans fear far more, and organizer. Under his direction, the prisoners dig another tunnel, a real mass escape tunnel, and it works long enough to matter. By the time the guards discover it, around 10 men are already out, Ash among them, gone through the wire and into the countryside. He gets aboard a goods train heading for Kovno, deep inside Lithuania, riding among the freight with no papers that will survive a hard look, no language, nothing but nerve and the will to keep moving east. He hides on a Lithuanian farm, surviving on the kindness and the terror of strangers again. Every meal a risk to the people feeding him, every hour a gamble that the next knock is not a soldier. And then he sets his sights on the real prize, the Baltic coast, and beyond it, neutral Sweden, where a man who simply reaches it is free, beyond the Reich, beyond the wire, beyond all of it. No tunnel back to a camp this time. A border, a real one. He is nearer to vanishing for good than he has ever been, or ever will be again. Station guards catch him before he can take the last step. So close. And this time the cost of being caught changes shape completely. He falls back into Gestapo hands, and they take him not to a camp, but to Berlin, to the heart of the Reich. And there they look at his record, escape after escape after escape, and they reach a conclusion that is meant as an accusation and lands as a death sentence. No ordinary prisoner, they decide, is this good at this. He must be a professional, a planted escape artist sent into the camps deliberately to train Allied prisoners to break out, a saboteur in a flight jacket. It is his second capital accusation, and it carries the same penalty as the first, the wall. They press him in Berlin the way they pressed him in that first French cell, and he gives them the same thing he always gives them, which is nothing they can use. He is a pilot. He was shot down. He tried to go home because that is what a captured soldier is supposed to do. Every word of it is true, and none of it fits the spy they have decided he must be. And that gap, the gap between the man they are sure they are holding and the man actually sitting in front of them, is the only thing keeping him breathing. Sit inside the trap that has just closed, because it is the cruelest one yet. The better he escapes, the more convinced they become that he is a spy who must be shot. His own brilliance is building the case for killing him. Every skill that keeps him alive on the outside marks him for death the moment he is caught. He survives Berlin. They cannot quite prove the spy theory, so they send him back to Sagan, back to Stalag Luft 3, the escape-proof camp where it began. But the rules have quietly, permanently changed. From here on, escape no longer costs him a few weeks in a cell. From here on, escape risks the wall, and Sagan is about to prove that, in blood. So what happens when the most famous escape of the war finally begins? And what does a man do when freedom itself becomes a death sentence? Back at Stalag Luft 3, the punishment cell becomes his second home. The Germans have a place for men who will not behave, a row of solitary confinement cells the prisoners call the cooler, cold, bare, and alone. And Bill Ash is sent there so often for so many attempts and schemes and infractions that the other prisoners give him a title, half a joke and half a salute. They call him the Cooler King. Hear what that name actually means, because the legend has sanded the edges off it. There is no crown. There is a concrete box too small to pace, a single high window, a bucket, and days that bleed into each other with no one to talk to and nothing to do but think. Men come out of long stretches in solitary hollowed out, talking to walls, their nerves gone. The Cooler King is simply the man who has been put in that box more often and for longer than anyone else alive, and who keeps walking back into the camp afterward already plotting the next reason they will throw him back in. The title is not a trophy. It is an invoice, and he pays it again and again without once asking for the price to come down. On the night of the 24th of March, 1944, the most famous tunnel of the war finally broke the surface beyond the wire of Stalag Luft 3, a tunnel 30 feet down and over 300 feet long, dug with stolen tools and shored with bedboards, ventilated by a homemade pump, the work of hundreds of men over months. 76 prisoners crawl out through it into the freezing dark in what the world will forever call the Great Escape. Bill Ash is not among them. He is locked in the cooler that very night. Think about that. The man who lived to escape, who organized tunnels and game transfers and reached for the Baltic, misses the greatest escape of them all. For one reason, he is being punished at that exact moment for all the escapes that came before. The escaper is the one man who cannot join the escape. When they finally let him out, he learns what became of it. Of the 76 who got away, almost all are hunted down across a continent on full alert and recaptured within days. And then the gut punch, the thing that turns this story permanently dark. 50 of those recaptured men Ash had schemed beside, suffered beside, frozen beside in the same row of cooler cells, are taken out in small groups to quiet fields and roadsides and shot in the back of the head, murdered in cold blood on the direct order of Adolf Hitler, then handed back to the camp as urns of ash, a lesson to anyone who still believed escape was a game. There is no cooler anymore. That is the lesson, written in the blood of his friends. Escape does not mean solitary now. Escape means execution. So here, finally, is the no-win this entire story has been tightening toward, frame by frame, since that Gestapo cell. Every single reason a sane man could ever need to stop is suddenly true at once. He is grieving 50 friends. He is under his own standing death sentence, and he is forced to face the one fact he has spent years refusing to feel, that for all of it, all the tunnels and the sewage and the freight trains and the Baltic coast, he has never once actually made it home. Not a single clean escape. Years of cost, and nothing on the board. Death, grief, futility, all of it landing on one beaten, stubborn man at the same time. What could possibly make this man finally accept the wall? Does he break? He does not break, but the world that built the walls is about to. By the winter of 1945, the Reich was collapsing inward, the front lines folding toward Berlin from every direction. The camps that once felt eternal are suddenly temporary. Ash is moved again to the naval prison camp of Marlag Nord, and then, as the end closes in, driven out onto the road. The forced march. Thousands of prisoners walked west through the snow in the dying months of the war, column after ragged column, starving, freezing, boots falling apart, men dropping where they stood and not getting up, herded by guards who themselves no longer know where they are going or why. There is no tunnel to dig here, no identity to swap, no clever trick. There is only the cold and the road and the next step. He survives it the only way left to him, one foot in front of the other, because by now simply staying alive has become its own form of defiance. And then, in the chaos of a continent coming apart, he walks through a battlefield and out the other side, into freedom. Here is where you brace for the movie ending, the music swelling, the home run at last. It does not come. There is no clean escape, no triumphant dash across a final border. There never was, not once in all those years. The truth is quieter and harder than that. The war simply ended around a man who had not, for a single day of it, agreed to be a prisoner. And that is the reframe that recast everything you have just watched. Because you have been keeping score the whole time by the wrong number. You have been asking, did he get away? And the answer kept coming back, no. But getting out was never the contest. Look at what actually happened across all those years. They held his body every single time. They never once held his will. Not in the Gestapo cell, not in the cooler, not in Berlin under a sentence of death. The system that filed him as a problem could lock the man up at will and never, not for 1 hour, make him a prisoner on the inside. So count it the right way now. 13 times, by some accounts, he went out. 13 times they dragged him back. On the old scoreboard, that is 13 losses. But every one of those nights, for as long as it lasted, was a night the most total prison system ever built had to admit it could not hold him. They could undo the escape. They could never undo the fact of it, the proof that their wire and their towers and their death sentences meant nothing to a man who refused to agree they were real. The Reich that sentenced him to death twice, that murdered his friends in cold fields, that built the most secure prisons it could imagine specifically to hold men like him, is rubble, and he is alive. By the only measure that ever mattered, he beat them on every single one of those nights the scoreboard called a failure. The walls only hold if you believe in them. He never believed in a single one. That is the real reason no prison Hitler built could keep him. Now pay the honest bill, because there is one, and it is steep. His closest friends are dead, shot in fields for doing the thing he had taught and led and lived for. He spent his entire war not in dogfights and glory, but in cages and freezing cells, in sewage tunnels and forced marches, with nothing a recruiting poster would ever dare to show. And when he finally walks out into peace, he walks out as a man without a country. The American citizenship he threw away to get into the fight is simply gone, surrendered years ago at a Canadian recruiting desk, and there is no easy way back. He fought one of the great fights of the century, and at the end of it, he belongs to no nation on earth. And then the quiet vindication. The enemy that tried to execute him for the crime of escaping is finished, and a grateful Briton pins a medal on his chest, an MBE, honoring him for the exact defiance the Reich tried to put against a wall. Years later, the world would meet a version of him without ever knowing his name. A cocky American in a prison camp, king of the cooler, bouncing a baseball off the wall of a solitary cell, the breakout star of the most famous escape film ever made. The character is said to be drawn, in part, from Bill Ash. But the real man was quieter than that, and harder, and he never got the motorcycle. The myth is fun. The truth outruns it. He lived a long, strange, restless life after the war, a writer and a permanent thorn in the side of every establishment he ever met, unbroken to the end. He died at 96. If a man who treated every wall as a question is the kind of story you want more of, then Wing Commander Harry Wingsday, who escaped camps, forged his way out, and even broke out of Sachsenhausen concentration camp, is waiting for you right now.